We projected every Power Four team's record, and today we're going to look at the SEC standings. Now, keep in mind, projected record is different from predicted record. Projected conference records are based off of the percent chance that we assign to each game for each team during all of our schedule preview videos. So, taking a look at the standings, Texas just barely comes out on top. Georgia, decent gap there between them and third place in South Carolina.
Yeah, but I think the SEC is going to be in a similar situation as we saw last year. There's going to be a lot of back and forth between these top teams, but also it's going to be interesting seeing the fallout of Tennessee with Nico Imalava transferring out, but we'll get to Tennessee in a little bit. South Carolina, I think, with Lenore Sellers back at quarterback, they just win one or two of those like one score games, like the LSU game or the Alabama game. They won either of those games. They're a college football playoff team last season. And I think they're in a great shape to make a push for an SEC title next year. But I do think Texas and Georgia are the more experienced teams. So I think that's going to be the matchup we end up seeing anyway.
Yeah, I think this tier with South Carolina, Alabama, and Florida is very interesting. We do currently have South Carolina projected to beat Alabama, but again, that can change when we do our actual predictions coming up here in the next few weeks. And then I think Florida is going to be a really good team, but they have such a tough schedule. I really like DJ Lagway at quarterback. So if he has a really good year, maybe Florida can make a push, but it's going to be tough. So moving on to that lower tier then with Tennessee, Texas A&M, and LSU. Really, Tennessee's not going to be in this tier anymore. Losing Nico is a huge deal, and I think they're going to drop just a little bit here. As for A&M and LSU, both very solid teams. Marcel Reed back at quarterback for Texas A&M, and Garrett Nussmeier for LSU. So both of these teams are going to be very, very good in 2025. It's tough to say if I had to pick, I'd say LSU will end up being better, but they just finished just behind A&M, likely due to the schedule. I think,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, especially considering LSU and A&M play each other at Death Valley next season. Maybe we're hating on LSU a little bit, but their schedule is pretty difficult. They got a couple tough road games with Bama and Oklahoma, and we think Oklahoma will be a pretty decent team next year. But LSU definitely has potential to get up into that next year with Alabama, Florida, and South Carolina. And the same goes for Texas A&M. It just depends on how Marcel Reed plays with a full season under his belt at A&M. In the next tier, we have a couple teams that are going to be pretty fun to watch, but are just missing a couple key contributors at certain positions. That's going to be Ole Miss, Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma is definitely going to shoot up a little bit. I think we underrated them a little bit, and we did this before they got Jaden Ott from Cal through the transfer portal. But John Matier coming in at quarterback, one of the most highly sought after transfer portal acquisitions. And Oklahoma is looking like they're going to be a really solid team. Like I said, hosting LSU to close out their season is going to be a very interesting game. Mizzou, I think, was overrated last year, and we're going to see them kind of drop off a little bit, especially with a pretty difficult schedule. Ole Miss just losing key contributors from both sides of the ball to the NFL draft, mostly being Jackson Dart. But Austin Simmons is going to be, I think, a really solid quarterback for them, just a little bit young. So we're going to have to see how he develops in the first couple of games. And then Vandy, Diego Pavia returning, one of the most fun teams to watch last year. The stories were amazing, but I do think their schedule is pretty difficult, and they're still missing a couple key guys on both sides of the ball to really make them competitive and jump into that next tier.
yeah, and then this bottom tier, I don't know if I necessarily want to loop Auburn in with those teams because this team has a lot of hype around them and they definitely have the potential to live up to it. I think they have maybe a good chance to pull off a pretty big upset, but still not a super easy schedule. I think there's a few games they're going to struggle in. So we'll probably see them around the middle of the pack, maybe a little bit more towards the bottom in 2025. But this bottom tier, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi State, there's a good gap between Arkansas and the other two. But I do think Arkansas most likely is going to be near the bottom of the standings. Kentucky and Mississippi State, I would be shocked if they were not both the last two teams.
Yeah, and Arkansas is it's just a product of having a pretty difficult schedule, especially to close out the year. But I do think they have a lot of talent on their roster, specifically Taylon Green at quarterback. So we could see them kind of in the mix, being a pretty competitive team. But I do think just with their schedule, they're probably going to finish in the bottom half of the conference.
It's definitely not a knock on Arkansas. They're a very talented team. I just think with, like you said, their schedule difficulty and just how good a lot of these other SEC teams are going to be, they're just going to end up near the bottom of the standings just out of pure bad luck. Taking a look at this projected conference title game, though, Texas and Georgia once again. Who wins it this time? It would be a really good game. But personally, I would lean towards Arch Manning over Gunnar Stockton in this quarterback battle. And in the end, I think that the Longhorns get it done.
I think Texas has been recruiting very well and using the transfer portal very effectively. I think they have 5 transfers at the D tackle position alone. So this is going to be a crazy game. This is also going to be a rematch because 3 weeks prior they will have played each other in Athens, Georgia. So it's going to depend on who ends up winning that game. But I do think that Arch Manning, I think the hype even if though it might be a little bit over the top, I think the hype is there. I think he's going to be a very, very good quarterback next year. And like you said, I trust him more than Gunnar Stockton to lead the team. I think Georgia might see a little bit of regression from the norm from last season. Thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of our videos, and we will see you in the next one.